Hello everyone, it's me, Danielle Dallas Sousa, and welcome back to Space. Lots of you guys have asked me to report on the SLS. What is it? What's the timeline? How does it work? And what does it stand for? You guys have questions and I'm here to answer it. So let's get started with this week's episode. Okay, so SLS stands for Space Launch System. Here is the goal of SLS taken from the NASA site. Quote, to fulfill America's future needs for deep space missions, SLS will evolve into increasingly more powerful configurations. SLS is designed for deep space missions and will send Orion or other cargo to the moon, which is nearly 1,000 times farther than where the space station resides in low Earth orbit. The rocket will provide the power to help Orion reach a speed of at least 24,500 miles per hour needed to break out of the low Earth orbit and travel to the moon. So let's chat a little bit about what actually is the SLS. To break it down really quickly, it's basically the $17 billion rocket that will hold the spacecraft that sends people to space. So similarly, the Saturn V was the rocket that transported the Apollo spacecraft. The SLS is actually a lot like the Saturn V and the shuttle program. Actually, it looks like a mashup of both of them. So I'm going to talk about some of its features while including some comparisons of the Apollo and shuttle program. The SLS will have the ability to tolerate a minimum of 13 tanking cycles due to launch scrubs and other launch delays before the actual launch. Normally, when you fuel and defuel, you have to replace certain things. This would be great because they can fill it up and defuel it 13 times before they have to replace anything. The rocket can basically remain at the launch pad for at least 180 days and can remain in stacked configuration for at least 200 days. So I feel like that's enough time. The SLS system core stand is 65 meters long and 8.4 meters in diameter, which is roughly the same diameter as the Saturn V's first stage, and mounts a main propulsion system, an MPS incorporation for RS-25 engines. The core stage is structurally similar to the shuttle program external tank, and actually the initial SLS flights will use the modified engines left over from the shuttle program. The difference here between the shuttle and the SLS is that the shuttle only had 3 of these things, and they've added another one for the SLS. The R2-25 design is known to be the most powerful, most power per mass type that has ever been built. Okay. So let's move on to the boosters. What is a booster, you might ask? Well, a booster is the first stage of a multi-stage launch vehicle. These are traditionally necessary to launch spacecrafts into low Earth orbit and are especially important for a space vehicle to go beyond Earth orbit. People usually identify these boosters with those of the space shuttle, but the SLS versions are actually about twice as tall as the space shuttles. The boosters are designed to fall back to Earth once its fuel is expended, a point called booster engine cutoff. And because it's NASA, there's an acronym for it, and it's called BECO. I don't know if they call it BECO or BECO, but I like that name, BECO. Okay, let's bring this back to the SLS. 2 shuttle-derived solid rocket boosters will be used for the initial flight of the SLS to provide the additional power needed for the rocket. So they're gonna do this whole SLS thing in stages. As of 2019, 3 versions of the SLS are planned. Just like the Apollo program had many iterations before the legendary Saturn V. The 3 stages are Block 1, Block 1B, and Block 2. Each will use the same core stage with 4, hang on, there's a Maya hair in my eye. Damn it, Maya's not on set, but in my eye. Ow! Each will use the same core stage with 4 main engines, but here is what each block is and what is going to change in each one. So let's start with Block 1. This is going to be the first SLS vehicle, and it can send more than 57,000 pounds to orbit the moon. It will be powered by twin 5-segment solid rocket boosters. Let me explain that real quick. So the 5 segments is referring to the type of booster. 5 segments would require little change of infrastructure to the already existing model for the space shuttle, but it would allow the ability to carry an additional 20,000 pounds of payload. And the solid fuel rocket boosters, here's an acronym for you, SBRs. This one is actually kind of important, so remember that. solid fuel rocket boosters, is SBRs, which is kind of like the shuttle. These are large solid propellant motors used to provide thrust in spacecraft launches. So the modifications to the 5-segment boosters for these launches from the shuttle is the SLS 5-segment boosters will have the addition of a center booster segment, new avionics, and lighter insulation. This 5-segment solid fuel rocket booster provides approximately 25% more total impulse than the shuttle, and it will not be recovered after it's used. Block 1 will be used for the first 3 Artemis missions. So that's for the boosters, but let's talk about the Block 1 upper stage. The upper stage on the SLS is called the Interim Cryogenic Propulsion Stage, ICPS. It's basically a repackaged version of a Delta IV upper stage, which if you're like me and you're like, what is a Delta V? Let me show you. This is what that is, and this is what the SLS will look like with its upper stage. The SLS is able to send the Orion capsule and its service module around the moon, and it's powered by a single RL-10B2. So basically, Artemis 1 will be launched into an initial suborbital trajectory to ensure safe disposal of the core stage. The ICPS will then perform an orbital insertion burn at the apogee. That means the farthest from Earth, and a subsequent translunar injection burn to send Orion towards the moon. Phew! I am learning so much, aren't you? The next planned evolution of the SLS will be called the Block 1B crew vehicle. This time, they will use a new powerful exploration upper stage, EUS. They will be using the same Block 1 booster Morphenheimer thing, but the upper stage will be different. So this, as I said, is going to be succeeding Block 1's interim cryogenic propulsion stage. It's very similar to the S15B, which was the fire stage of the Saturn V rockets, and the second stage on the Saturn 1B uncrewed Apollo missions, as well as the Apollo 7 mission. Okay. So now that we know what the EUS is, similar to the S1VB, the EUS will have completed the SLS ascent phase and then reignite it to send its payload to destinations beyond low Earth orbit. So many acronyms. It is expected to be used by Block 1B and Block 2. They share the core stage diameter of 8.4 meters and will be powered by 4 RL-10 engines. Whew! The team! SLS has more than 1,000 companies from across the US, and every single NASA center is supporting the development of this powerful rocket. This is a NASAception for you, okay? Because listen to this. The Marshall Space Flight Center is working on the Orion program that is managed by NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, and the Exploration Ground System at Kennedy, but all 3 programs are managed by the Exploration Systems Development Division within the Human Exploration and Operations Mission Directorate at NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C. Whew! Wow. The SLS is not without controversy. The program has been working on this for almost the past 9 years, and it's way over budget and way behind schedule. Originally, the projected budget when it was approved was $10.6 billion back in 2011 when construction started, but it's now at $17 billion. And forget about the construction. They say each SLS flight will be at least $1 billion. Just to put that into perspective, that is 11 times more expensive than the SpaceX Falcon Heavy rocket per launch. Also, critics are saying that NASA should not build these rockets, but just buy them. We have the technology, we got the people. So what do you guys think? How do you think the SLS will compare to commercial space capsules? If they're over budget and so far behind schedule, should they just scrap the whole thing? But I mean, that's 9 years of my taxes. I want to see it go somewhere. Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, leave a comment about what you think I should talk about in the upcoming videos. There's a lot more on the SLS, but I was trying to break it down in a digestible way. So I hope you guys learned something. Anyways, what do you want to know more about? Leave it in the comments. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Thanks everyone so much for watching. If you enjoyed learning about the SLS, because I know you were wondering, couldn't sleep at night, wondering what is the SLS, leave a comment, like, subscribe. Follow us on Instagram. Follow me on Instagram. Always need another follower. That's weird. Bye.